think Rameshwar, someone asked Prabhupada, why do we dress like this? And Prabhupada said, because you wanted to. I never said you had to do that.
You said that?
Yeah, it's in the Veda base. That's the thing. You know, you're in this movement, and you, since you were practically born in the movement, and I travel around the world. No one knows what Prabhupada said.
Yeah.
You have these ultra-conservative devotees who govern ISKCON, and they've fabricated this ultra-conservative Prabhupada, and that's the one they keep in the center of ISKCON. And it cripples the Western mission. Because all of social science, all of history, and all of Shastra actually, says that what we are doing now, trying to Indianize the Western world. Actually, you come on this side, I can talk to you easier. Hey, sit. I mean, you won't turn into a lizard or anything. So
it's just out of respect.
No, I know that, but we're. I mean, we're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you.
So, the world is not going to accept mythology. The world will accept the spiritual science. So, for example, take the term Vedic culture, which we use constantly, right? I mean, it's like every other word is Vedic culture. The first interesting fact about the term Vedic culture is that it's not Vedic. In other words, there is no Sanskrit in any Shastra that says Vedic culture. In fact, the word Vedic is used differently in Shastra. I'll tell you how the word Vedic is used in Shastra. And we have the exact word Vedic, Vedic. It's the same word, Vedic. In the Bhagavatam, the word Vedic, Vedika, is used practically always in contrast with Tantrika. Tantra, the word Tantra here refers to the early Vaishnava text. The Sanskrit word tan means to extend or expand. Tantra, the instrument for, like for example, Tene Brahma Hrida, in the first verse of the Bhagavad. The Lord extended Vedic knowledge to Brahma, or expanded Vedic knowledge. So, and in chapter 3 of the first canto, Narada Muni is declared to be an avatar because he brought Vaishnava Tantra. Tantram Satatama Chashta. He taught the Vaishnava Tantra. So things like, for example, the Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, and all that. That's not in the Vedas. That's not in Shruti. Vaikuntha is not in Shruti. The deity worship is not in Shruti. But it is in the Tantra literature, which is also, according to the Bhagavatam, authoritative literature. So, interestingly, the Bhagavatam uses the word Vedic in the same way academic scholars do, and not the way we do in ISKCON. It means the Shruti, the Vedic, and especially the Karmakanda. So the Bhagavatam says several times that in order to understand Krishna, you must accept knowledge from the Vedic and the Tantric sources, in the way those words are used in the Bhagavatam. The word Vedic is not used in the Bhagavatam as an all-encompassing term for the whole civilization. If you look at the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how's the word Vedic used there? There, the word Vedic is used practically exclusively in the term Vaidika Brahman, which means Karmakanda Brahmana, who does all the rituals and everything. And that's how it's used. So both in the Bhagavatam and the CC, the word Vedic is not used as an all-encompassing term for entire civilization. But that's all right. We can use it that way because we know what we mean. And Prabhupada uses it all the time. So it's not like it's bad. It's just we have to know what we're talking about. Now, what about the word culture? What's the Sanskrit word for culture? I don't know. I don't think there is one. I mean, not exactly in the sense. For example, if we say Gujarati culture, what comes to mind? A certain traditional way of cooking, dancing, rituals, architecture. In other words, an ethnic tradition. Or if I say Mexican culture, Hey, come on in.
Thank you.
Still a few good seats left.
Sir.
Hey, Hare Krishna. No seat there? I'm doing my propaganda. I was making the point that, I'll just give you a very, very brief summary. The term Vedic culture, which we use constantly, technically is not Vedic because it's not found in Shastra. Shastra doesn't use the term Vedic culture. And if you look at the adjective Vedic, it's used in other ways. The Bhagavatam is just used to contrast with Tantrika, two kinds of literature. The Shruti literatures, like the four Vedas and Upanishads, which don't mention Vaikuntha, the expansions of Godhead, deity worship. All those things are actually not in the Shruti. But they are in the Tantra literature, and in the first canto, third chapter, Narada Muni is given as an avatar, an incarnation of Krishna, because he brought Vaishnava Tantra. So Tantra Sattvatama Chasta. That's how he became an avatar. So Tantra here means that other body of literature, like the Puranas, Itihasa, and Bhagavatam says that you have to get knowledge from both. So using the word Vedic as an all-encompassing term for entire civilization is something new. At least it's not in Shastra. But we can use it. I mean, we understand, Veda means knowledge, so the civilization based on real knowledge is Vedic, so it's fine. It's not like a terrible thing. The word culture, I don't know of any Sanskrit word that means exactly culture in the modern sense. And therefore, you will not find any Shastra, the literal term, Vedic culture. Now, when you hear the word culture, like if you say Gujarati culture, Mexican culture, you were from?
Sarajevo, Bosnia.
Bosnia, oh yeah. So let's say Bosnian culture or Eskimo culture. You know, it's what it means is a certain traditional way of cooking, of dressing, of architecture, maybe marriage rituals, festivals, an ethnic tradition. That's what the word culture means, right? See, like Cajun culture or something like that. And so because of that association, when devotees, especially in many Western countries, when they hear the term Vedic culture, they believe that there is a Vedic culture which means some like absolute, eternal, supreme way of dressing, of cooking, of dancing, musical instruments, a culture.
Volume of the music?
What's that?
The volume of the music?
Yeah, ear shattering. So the problem is there's no evidence in Shastra that there is such a thing. There's no evidence in Shastra, for example, that there is such a thing as Vedic architecture. For one reason, there's no Vedic architecture book.
What's the book they always quote? The
Vastu.
Vastu.
Yeah, but Vastu is just, first of all, we don't know how old the current Vastu is. Just because a book is old in Sanskrit doesn't mean that some divine person revealed it. And it's about configurations, like it should face this way, don't put these two things together. It's not architecture. And I'm not even sure it works that well, but that's just my opinion. And I'm not sure it was revealed by God. I think it may just be an old book in Sanskrit. But apart from that, I mean, I accept the Bhagavatam and the Gita. I'm not an atheist. But my point is, within ISKCON, it's very common to have this, I believe, mythological idea that one of the great purposes of ISKCON is to re-Vedicize the world in the sense of external culture. Teach people the right and perfect spiritual way of dressing, cooking, architecture. So devotees will, and it leads to very absurd results. Like devotees say, we're building a Vedic temple. What they mean is they're building a temple with Indian architecture heavily influenced by Muslims and Europeans. And that's Vedic architecture. Or, you're wearing a Vedic shirt, which comes from Muslims, kurta. Or
Vedic instrument, harmonium, which is not Indian.
Yeah, so it's, or for example, only offer to Krishna Vedic preparations, and then it turns out that Krishna really likes Turkish food. So it leads to all these absurdities, actually. And then, so ISKCON, what Prabhupada actually taught, if you listen to Prabhupada's lectures when he first came to America, and I think it's very interesting, because I think if you really want to know how to spread the movement in this country, you have to especially pay attention to what Prabhupada did and said before he went back to India.
1960s.
70.
something.
Yeah, from 66, 70, because when Prabhupada went back to India, a few things happened which totally transformed ISKCON, and in some ways, not for the better. Some forever, not for better.
Don't mind us.
Beatles. So, one thing that happened is that there was a flood of misinformation. Because what happened is when Prabhupada went to India, and there's no internet back then, and there was no Hare Krishna temple could even afford to make long distance phone calls domestically, much less international calls. They didn't exist. So we would get letters by snail mail from Prabhupada's secretaries, and when Prabhupada took the devotees to India, he had to retrain them in certain ways, because certain things that in the West were okay were not okay in India. For example, when I joined the movement, people didn't go crazy if you touched your prashant with your left hand. But in India, especially back then, now it's changed, but especially back then, if you ate with your left hand, people just think you're like a gorilla. And so Prabhupada started to emphasize different things. And also, for example, in Vrindavan, when they installed the deities in Vrindavan,
He brought the South Indian Brahmin.
they had to do all these rituals. And Prabhupada said, we don't need all these rituals. We don't need all these rituals, but the local Brahmins will have a cow, which is Vedic. The local Brahmins will just go crazy if we don't do it. But what happened is that you have all these, I don't know, you call them white Hindus, you get all these devotees going to India, and it became like this game of one-upsmanship, in the sense that, I'm more, Vedic than you are. And so then it started to blow, but it started to come back to America, like, you have these devotees coming back from India, like, no, that's not the way you tie your dhoti. That's not the way you cook this preparation. That's not the way you do puja. That's not the way you do this. That's not the way you do that. And it just became this, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, and ISKCON was transformed. Not only that, something else happened at the same time, roughly the same time that the movement went to India, and it just began really, in many ways, degrading the Western mission by Indianizing it, making it irrelevant. At the same time, the book distribution revolution, which in many ways is glorious, and in some ways, frankly, was disastrous. I know you're not supposed to say that, but the movement did collapse after Prabhupada left soon after, and so something went wrong. And many things went wrong, but because if you look at the sociology, kinds of human relationships you find in warrior societies, they're very different. For example, women are, there may be chivalry towards women, but they're definitely put aside, and they are an inferior class, even if they're to be protected and all that. And so ISKCON sort of developed this warrior society mentality, and the position of women went really down. Because before that whole militarization of ISKCON, the position of women was different in ISKCON. They were like sisters. Equal. Yeah, they were just our sisters. We treated them like sisters. And then you have these young sannyasis, who, I was one of them. We were just like, until you get this fanatical preaching about, gender and all that. You get this fanatical preaching, crazy preaching. You get the militarization of ISKCON, the name of book distribution. Everything's coming from India. And just ISKCON became something very different. ISKCON became something very different. And the relationship between devotees became much more hierarchical. And the relationship between devotees and non-devotees really degraded, because they were just little walking money machines. They were just book points and Lakshmi points. And so they became dehumanized. If you look at the movement, let's say in the late 60s, up till 1970, the relation between devotees is very different. It's not so hierarchical. You don't get these so much big, heavy leaders. The relation with Prabhupada is different. People actually know Prabhupada. Prabhupada knows them. It's not this mythological, distant, iconic Prabhupada. So that if you read like H.D.Goswami's book and see how Prabhupada interacted with his American disciples, Prabhupada was very much, and authentically, he was a holy person. He was a pure devotee. But in terms of practical strategy, he would just let his American disciples figure out how to present the movement. He dressed this way, dressed that way. And so then, as the movement grows, and the age, it's like if you look at the Old Testament, you know, any scholar will tell you, you can see different historical periods. Like, for example, in the earliest days of the Old Testament, there's a very intimate relation between God and people. Like, God talks to Adam, talks to Eve, talks to Abraham. Even when Isaac, when Isaac's wife Rebecca is having difficult pregnancy, she just goes talk to God, like, hey, come on, what's up with this difficult pregnancy? And so there's just this like intimate family relationship between God and his followers. And that was something like ISKCON. I mean, back in the early days, Prabhupada, it was like, you know, his dad. And, you know, Prabhupada might say, on a practical level, not philosophy, we should do this. Do I say, nah, it doesn't work, Prabhupada, we got to do it that way. Okay. But then, as ISKCON grows explosively, and so more and more, you know, the great majority of devotees don't know Prabhupada, other than just as, you know, Prabhupada. They don't know him personally. He doesn't know them. Prabhupada himself is not really aware of what's going on in the Western world. Prabhupada rejected as absurd the idea that a pure devotee knows everything. He rejected that as absurd. But of course, you know, who cares what Prabhupada said? You know, we should just go ahead with the mythological version. If you look at what happened to Jesus, it's incredible. It's just spectacular. I've studied a lot the early history of Christianity. If you look at, as far as we can recover him, you know, the historical Jesus, like who was Jesus, what did he do, what did he say, and you can just trace step by step the mythologizing of Jesus till finally they come up with like this huge whopper, you know, Jesus is God, like fully man, fully God. They just like really go off the rails. And you can just see it step by step. And it's based on all kinds of historical circumstances that I won't go into. So, same thing with Prabhupada. You can trace step by step this mythologizing of Prabhupada. Now, Prabhupada's a pure devotee. He personally told me that he actually was never in illusion. He personally told me that he always knew Krishna. And he's the founder of Acharya. And we're giving our lives to Prabhupada. So I'm not, going off somewhere. But the point is, here's a simple question. Should you see everything through Prabhupada's teachings? Or is there one very important part of ISKCON that we should not see through Prabhupada's teachings, that we should place outside of Prabhupada's teachings? Frankly, many leaders would say the second. There is one part of ISKCON, a major part of ISKCON, central part, that we should not see through Prabhupada's teachings. And that part is Prabhupada himself. Because if you read Prabhupada's books and his lectures, and what does Prabhupada say about Prabhupada? What are his powers? What are his limitations? When is he infallible? When is he not infallible? If you take Prabhupada's own teachings on Prabhupada, and you match that to the Prabhupada the leaders want to keep in the center, it's not exactly a match. I mean, it matches on certain points, and other points it really doesn't match. So to give one example, in the, just one obvious example is the Prabhupada we're supposed to keep in the center is very conservative. It wants everyone to wear Indian clothes and this and that, blah, blah. I published a paper, which I'll send to any of you for a very reasonable fee. No, but in which I show page after page of Prabhupada quotes where he says the opposite. So the Prabhupada that's being kept in the center is a very partial Prabhupada. Just the conservative side. Prabhupada he had a very liberal, open side. He's willing to adjust everything, within reason, not philosophy. 3 things Prabhupada said you can't change. Sometimes Prabhupada says don't change anything. Sometimes he says adjust everything. So the solution is obvious. It's a paradox. Paradox means an apparent contradiction that you have to resolve by investigating further. And so there are 3 things you can't change: our philosophy, our practice, and our institutional framework. I take the case of Hridayananda when he went over the moon. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
You want to join us?
Well, I have it's getting out.
Oh, go
this
ahead.
is Dr.
Hare Krishna.
Dr. Anand Dalvi is, can you just want to introduce yourself, Maharaj?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm Ananta Prabhu. I live here in Atlanta and I'm a doctor. So
Hare Krishna, me too, I'm a doctor, I'm not a medical doctor. I can tell you, if you feel some pain in your Sanskrit grammar, I can help you.
good to have you here, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Continue.
Hare Krishna.
I'll catch him out.
Yes, we'll see you later. So, where was I?
The three things you
Yeah.
cannot change.
So, Hridayananda, for example, when he deviated, he changed the philosophy, he changed the sadhana, not superficial things like clothes, he changed the actual sadhana. And he left the institution. So he changed all three of those. In Krishna West, for example, that's your indication to cheer. In Krishna West, we don't change any of them. But you see, you get these people that can't. It's almost like in ISKCON, there are actually 5 sinful activities. The fifth one is thinking. So it's, people don't analyze. Prabhupada says, look at his purport to 454, make all adjustments. What works in India won't work in America. You have to adjust things. But that Prabhupada, who over and over and over again tells us, make adjustments, change the details. You could, he sent Tamal Krishna to China. He sent Tamal Krishna to China, and in a suit with hair. He was a sannyasi, and he was very successful. He was a great devotee. There's thousands. I could easily prove to you in a second that cultural barriers are more difficult than legal barriers. Now, Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada not only blessed him, but was delighted that he made all these adjustments, and now we have thousands of devotees in China. So legal barriers can be overcome. But now consider another country. You consider France. In France, there are no legal barriers to the movement, but there are major cultural barriers. Hare Krishna. Oh, do you want to come in?
We're just going up.
Okay, nice to see you again. Rasa Mai. We'll see you later.
See you later.
Hare Krishna.
We're leaving tomorrow.
You are leaving tomorrow. Oh, I'll follow you.
You're welcome to Bangalore.
Oh yes, I'm booking my flight for Bangalore. Hare Krishna. So in France, no legal barrier, but major cultural barriers. In China, thousands and thousands of devotees. In France, disaster. Conclusion, scientific conclusion, cultural barriers often are actually much more serious than legal barriers. And so if Prabhupada authorized Tamal Krishna to make all these adjustments, and look at the result, what about a case where the barriers are even more difficult? Because ultimately, the truth is what Prabhupada wanted is, get the job done. Just do it. Prabhupada wasn't a fool just quibbling over these little details. Just get it done. For example, when I took over Spanish BBT, and that Prabhupada had given an order that the Bhagavatam cannot be published soft cover, only hardcover. And I was printing books for Latin America. They don't have so much money, so I just printed it soft cover. I thought it was common sense. And I told Prabhupada what I did. He said, oh yeah, of course, great idea. So
how do you explain that Phalena for Parichyate?
yeah, and the phala, the fruit, is that our Western movement is now collapsed. It's just a little remnant of what it was. And for a lot of leaders, that's not a problem. In fact, there's one very famous, I wrote another paper I'll send you all my propaganda. I wrote a paper, called Thoughts on Deviation, which I explain all these things. And there's one leader, one of the most important GBC members, guru, everything, who's actually saying, well, maybe we're not supposed to really preach to people. You know, so Prabhupada's Pranam mantra. And you can say this. You see, because that's the impunity. If you're a leader in this movement, you can say whatever you want with impunity.
Big problem.
Yeah, he said we should be like the Amish. The Amish, by the way, all their growth is due to an extraordinary ability to reproduce. And so, yeah, but they actually have an official doctrine where they don't preach. And this person, you have these leaders, more than one, big leaders, you know, all the ISKCON titles, saying that maybe we should follow the Amish. It's in my paper, you'll see. I juxtaposed these statements, what Prabhupada said. So, it seems to me, anyone that takes Prabhupada seriously, we have a crisis. And if someone doesn't know ISKCON is in a crisis, they, first of all, have no idea what historical studies are. They have no idea how to read history. And they're just not paying attention. Because Prabhupada made it very clear that his entire global mission depended on the success of his movement in America and West Europe, and Australia and New Zealand. But it depended on the success of the movement in the West. That's not my Western chauvinism. It's not true because I want it to be true. And then you get devotees. You see, it's very interesting how devotees respond to the failure of our movement to carry out Prabhupada's global strategy. It doesn't mean we'll always fail, but we're failing now. And so, and in fact, if you ask, what's the GBC plan to revive the Western mission? There is none.
Or the strategic planning initiative.
There is none. There is none. No committee. There actually is no plan. And in fact, now they're having the SGGS. All the senior preachers are going to my court. I said, asking me to go, I said, well, can we talk about reviving the Western mission, which is the heart of Prabhupada's whole global strategy, and which has collapsed? And they said, no, we don't want it on the agenda. This is ISKCON. But it's 50 years, and everything is good. They refuse to put it on the agenda, the fact that the heart of Prabhupada's mission has collapsed. And they explicitly refuse to even put it on the agenda when all the senior preachers meet.
Scary.
Yes. And so, fortunately...
Did you take a vote on that, Maharaj? On that topic? Why didn't you get the views of other senior devotees?
No, because there was one devotee. He's a very nice devotee in other ways. I mean, he's a very nice devotee. He's organizing it, and I appealed and everything. No, they just don't want it on the agenda. They just want to talk about how we can all love each other and, you know. I'm sure you've heard of, you know, ad nauseum, the definition of insanity. Think you do the same thing,
Looking for a different result.
Yeah. So part of I'll tell you I think there's a philosophical misunderstanding. There are two mistakes, major mistakes that are all pervading in ISKCON. One philosophical, one historical, which is crippling the Western mission. The philosophical mistake is an exaggerated belief in Agyata Sukriti. Agyata Sukriti literally means unknown good deed. Agyata Sukriti, unknown good deed. So you go on Harinam, the sound went in their ear. They don't know what the hell you're doing, but the sound went in their ear. Or they touched a book, or bought a book, and of course, probably like 99% of people don't read it. Or they eat prasadam. Agyata Sukriti. Now, Prabhupada said there is such a thing, so I accept it because, you know, he's Prabhupada. However, we can use our intelligence. Prabhupada strongly encouraged me to do. Like Prabhupada actually wrote me a letter one time, and he said that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Rasoham apsukonte, I'm the taste of water. So, he said, mental speculation is, you question, is Krishna the taste of the water? Maybe he's not. That's mental speculation. Philosophical speculation is you accept Krishna's statement, but then you ask, well, how is he the taste and water? Now, so Prabhupada authorized me to do philosophical speculation, and I will cash in that blessing right now. And so Prabhupada said there's, a Gyata Sukriti. So I accept it. My question is, how beneficial is it? And what history tells me, and what Krishna tells me in the Gita is, not very. Not so much. The last verse of chapter 17 of the Gita, don't kill the messenger. The last verse of chapter 17, Krishna says, as in, Hare Krishna movement, Krishna says, Ashadhaya hutam datam. In the class I explained that any religious activity you perform, including yagya, like Sankirtan yagya, any religious activity you perform, and you don't really believe in what you're doing, the result, asat. Not much. And Krishna says, na pretya no ihad. And there's very little result in this life or the next. So you could just say, well, we're building the future by all this. No. Krishna says, in this life or the next. Rupa Goswami, I think it's Upadeshamrita, verse number 2, Niyamagraha, where Rupa Goswami says, if you think the results of bhakti will come automatically, that will destroy your bhakti. Now, we go out on the street believing that the world can be saved involuntarily and unconsciously. And history is telling us, no way, Bhakta Jose. It's just, are we just completely blind? The movement has been declining in the West for 40 years. And what does it take before people open their eyes? And so I think that's a disaster. That idea that you don't have to take the world seriously. You don't have to respect people. You don't have to care about what they're comfortable with. You can just go parading out on the street, jump around, and if they like it or don't like it, if they walk by, it doesn't matter because it's all automatic. It's all... I think that attitude is a disaster. Interestingly, there is one aspect of ISKCON where we care very much what the public thinks, and that is when money is involved, like when you open a restaurant. So if you open a restaurant and you need people to come and buy the prasadam, then we are very, very concerned about people's taste. But not in Harinam, because there's no money involved.
So what is the test? What is the test that things...
Okay, guys, just one more thing.
Okay,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I want to say one more thing, and then we'll get to the Lou Rawls point. And that is, so that, I think, philosophically mistaken belief in the power, the degree of power of Agyata Sukriti is mixed with a historical mistake, which creates the perfect storm of a dysfunctional Hare Krishna movement in the West. The historical mistake is believing, against Shastra, and what the Acharyas say, that it is the duty of this movement to present an eternal ethnic tradition to the world. Namely, Hindu, Muslim, India. So, it's actually, there's this unstated assumption. When you state it, you realize how ridiculous it is. But it's unstated, and so everyone thinks it's okay. And that is that, in fact, we practice Vaikuntha sadhana. In other words, here on earth, you dress like they do in the spiritual world. You eat what they eat in the spiritual world. You play the same musical instruments. You use the same architecture as in the spiritual world, so that it'll just be a seamless re-entry back into Vaikuntha. So actually, we don't merely practice sadhana bhakti, we practice Vaikuntha sadhana, which no acharya ever taught, and which no scripture ever taught. In fact, the Sannyas Dodi, which this very elegant specimen here is an example, the Sannyas Dodi, it actually, Bhaktisiddhanta adopted it from the Ramakrishna mission. they're a bunch of clowns. The wrong Krishna mission, who philosophically they're just like, and but they were popular in India. So this comes from the wrong Krishna mission. This comes from the Muslims. You put them together, and what do you get? The spiritual world. It's totally bona fide to laugh at my jokes. I just want to let you know. So, but the amount of irrationality and ahistoricity and just, you know what I mean? This is supposed to be a spiritual science. We're supposed to be the Brahmins, the learned scholars, and instead it's just like this circus of misconceptions and false assumptions and mythologies and this and that. And we just throw this package at the public and they say, no thanks. For example, if you have a child and your child's in danger, you'll do anything to save your child, isn't it? I mean, what wouldn't you do? For example, what if, let's say, just give an example, someone has a child who's being held hostage in some Muslim country or something. In order to go rescue your child, you got to put on Muslim clothes and everything, or even say, blah, 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 and so, you do it, isn't it? I mean, what wouldn't you do to save your child? Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that twice Krishna says he's the father of the universe. Once Arjuna says it, Pitasi Lokasya Charachas. So, everyone's family. What are we willing to do to save our family, to save all these souls in the West? Very little. Very little. It's like, take it or leave it. You don't like it? Say hello to Yamaraj for me. That's basically the attitude in the West. No logic, no reason. Like, let's give people books they actually will probably read, and if they do read, will understand. Let's present ourselves to people in a way that makes sense to them. They feel comfortable. The relationship between devotees and non-devotees is Veda Veda. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna presents the devotees, Madbhakta, as a separate group. Obviously, we're a little different, because we're devotees of Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, yes, there is a special community, my devotees. And at the same time, most of the time, Krishna presents everyone, all souls, as one group. Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishto. Isn't it? What's that? Ishwarak sarva bhutanam hridesher arjuna tishtati. Hare Krishna, you want to come in?
No,
Okay. If you're not disturbing me, you're just going to get bored out of your mind. So, yes. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he's afraid he's going to get bored. He really wouldn't, but he's afraid. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna presents everyone as one group. So my simple question is, when we go out on the street, we obviously show the difference. How do we show the sameness? Do we have 2 arms and 2 legs? How do we show that we're the same as them? Are we actually presenting a balanced picture? We're like you, just like you. You can identify with me. We're the same, but I do something you don't do. Do we really show that? Or do we go out and present Veda? I don't look like you. I don't sound like you. And I'm doing something you don't do. So it's just kind of like, this pious Indian Cirque du Soleil. What handle do we give people to grab onto us like, I'm like you? Now there are in the world, there are Indophiles. Some people love Indian culture. Some people like African culture. Some people like Mexican culture or Polynesian culture. But that's it. So there is something, with all due respect, in this movement, very, very sincere and often very mindless.
Well, so you mentioned the books, giving people different, approaching people differently in the literature,
Yeah.
and they read. So does that kind of like imply that we should instead distribute other books besides Prabhupada's books.
Prabhupada ordered us to do that. In other words, Prabhupada's books, obviously Prabhupada is the most pure soul among us, obviously. And his books are in that sense the most potent. Now, whether someone is ready, to read Prabhupada's books now, do you need to bring them to Prabhupada's books? I mean, obviously, at some point, a person has to read and understand and accept Prabhupada's books. But how do you get them there? So is it better, for example, to give out a Prabhupada book that someone doesn't read? If that's the case, some people read them, some people read them and a lot of people don't. So is it better to give someone a book they will read and then come to Prabhupada, or a book they won't read and never come to Prabhupada? It seems to me it's common sense. So let's say you give out books and you monitor your results and you keep in touch with people, and did you read it, did you like it, what do you think? If it turns out that a significant percentage of people that buy books from you read them and understand them, then it's great. If it turns out that a significant... Now, ISKCON, of course, doesn't do marketing, because that would be to show lack of faith in prophecy. Everyone else in the world does marketing. Everyone else in the world actually tries to understand, like people that buy their product, do they use it? Do they like it? What didn't they like? They throw it away? But we don't have to do that, because it's automatic. Even though Rupa Goswami says attitude destroys devotion, still, it's very popular among us. And Agyata Sukriti will do it all. So everyone else in the world actually does market. They want to know, like post-sale, what happened. We don't do that. I do know that during the glory days of book distribution in the airports, that a huge, Balabhadra was one of the great heroes, and the devotees that sold the books were they were great souls. I sold a lot of books. Balabhadra was, he was a Hall of Famer. So but the point is, a very large number of books were thrown away.
And not only thrown away, but like at the airport, we sold 5-10 books to a person. He throws them away. The guy that works at the airport takes them out of the garbage.
Sells them back to us.
Comes and sells them back to us. And we take them because he sells them cheap, we sell them again. The whole thing was tied into money.
Yeah. In other words, you have kind of like this religious fanaticism where, if we sell these books, it's absolute good. Even if people throw them away, it doesn't matter. Right. It does really not matter. Does it really? I mean, from your point of view as a devotee, let's say you sell a book, you do it sincerely as an act of devotion. Yeah, I mean, Krishna is pleased with you. So, for you, it doesn't matter, because you acted sincerely with devotion. So for you, it doesn't matter. Krishna gives you credit. But what about for the people? If it doesn't make a difference if people read or don't read the books we give them, then why give them at all? Because if it's just as good not to read them, then why even sell? Well, the difference is we get money. So, and we get points and prestige. So I'm saying, it does make a difference. It is better to give people books they can and will read and understand. Not only is it better, it's necessary. In the history of the world, I don't think a movement has ever spread by giving people literature that either they wouldn't read or couldn't understand. I don't think that ever happens. And it certainly didn't happen in ISKCON. Because if we want to talk, there were many problems in ISKCON, gurus that fell down and everything. There were many problems. But the fact is, I do not believe it's possible in this day and age, or ever really, to build a successful Hare Krishna movement by giving people books they don't read. Or if they do try to read it, can't understand them. That's just my view. I think our philosophy is that you have to actually read the book and agree with it. Yes.
Well, I'm just trying to get an understanding. The movement is in such a situation now. Going back to your point about developing the Indian community, the financial aspects of that, it's almost like the Titanic going toward the iceberg. It's just how are they going to turn it? So it's like so entrenched now. The financial dependency, mainly because of the size of our facility.
Okay, I'll tell you how I see that.
Yeah.
First of all, the fact that basically in North America it's an Indian Hare Krishna movement in North America.
Out of necessity, in a sense, isn't it? For the financial.
No, I don't believe that because I personally was sitting with Prabhupada. There's something I actually preached in Atlanta on GBC here, and they always didn't believe me or didn't accept it, even though, I mean, they believed it, but they didn't accept it, even though it came from Prabhupada. I was sitting with Prabhupada in Los Angeles one time. We got a letter from a devotee who was president of Delhi. And this was in the days before they even bought a temple in Delhi. They didn't always even own a temple in Delhi. They were renting a house.
Tejas? Was it Tejas? Yeah.
And it was a nice house in a really nice neighborhood in New Delhi. And so Tejas wrote to say that he had given up the house and rented another house, which was not as nice, in a neighborhood that wasn't as nice. The reason being that everyone left the temple. Everyone, including his wife. Everyone had left the temple because he was, anyway, Hare Krishna, he wasn't exactly like the HR guy. So, but he's a nice devotee. Anyway, so because everyone left the temple, he had to do all the deity worship. Because of that, he couldn't go out and make live members. There wasn't enough money. So I remember I was sitting much closer to Prabhupada than I am to you, sitting right in front of Prabhupada, and he said, he has done the wrong thing. He should have reduced the deity worship and kept the preaching going. Now what we found all over North America and all over the Western world, we had these big temples, like say Atlanta. Atlanta temple, all the deities were installed when there were like 70 devotees in the temple, 70 devotees, maybe a couple dozen Brahmins. We had to fight to do deity worship, isn't
Exactly.
it? Then, yeah,
It's
right.
not like that now.
I know. Twilight Zone. So now of course, we know.
It's a struggle.
And yet not now, but even let's say in 2003, when I became GBC, I could not convince the devotees. In fact, one of our mutual friends wrote a letter to the GBC saying that I should be removed because I repeated and followed what Prabhupada personally told me, which obviously disqualified me. So what I said in Atlanta is, let's simplify the deity worship, not offend the deities, not puja that's late or without respect, without devotion, everything punctual, neat, clean, loving, but just simplified. And let's focus on preaching, because that's what Prabhupada told me, and Prabhupada said that's why the temples exist. The temples exist for preaching. And yet the devotees there, they couldn't, even though it was coming from Prabhupada. So in temple after temple, all over the Western world, one leader after another made the decision that between this Bhagavad Vidi preaching and the Panchatratric Vidi, if something's got to go, it's the preaching. They did the opposite of what Prabhupada said. They turned his teachings upside down and just went for the money. But this was not an old story, a new story, because even back when Prabhupada was here, it was a struggle because it was always, money, money, money. It's all I want. It's what I want. So it's because, for example, ISKCON, first it was the incense, selling incense when I joined.
Yeah.
Then it was candles.
Yeah.
Then it was, lousy rock and roll records. Remember that?
Yeah, the lousy ones.
Yeah, well, the ones that didn't sell. Maybe they were good, but they didn't sell.
Yeah.
Then it was paintings. And then, finally, ISKCON in the West discovered the ultimate paraphernalia, the Hindu. Just the ultimate paraphernalia. Better than incense, better than candles, better than paintings. The ultimate paraphernalia. It's very interesting because Prabhupada said, just preach, money will come. Prabhupada used to shout that. I remember I was sitting at his feet at New Vrindavan in 1972. Were you there?
No, I heard all
I
about
was sitting at his feet, and his words just thrilled me.
Yeah.
Because I was inclined to preach.
Yeah.
Prabhupada said, just go out and preach. Don't worry about money. He said that just like a rich man, he advertises, he pays for advertising. If you advertise for Krishna, he will pay for it. So Prabhupada used to thunder those words. Just go out and preach. Do not worry about money. Preach. Money will come. And that went right into our brains. And it's like light goes into a prism, the image comes out upside down. So it went into the prism of the, devotee brain and came out the other end. Oh, just get money and preaching will come. And then when we discovered our ultimate paraphernalia, the ultimate cash cow, the Indian community, and sociological studies have shown, actually even a sociological study, academic study, done here in Atlanta, this temple, that what we all know, that the Indian community is mostly, focused on puja, the temple experience and everything. And they are not burning with desire to save non-Indians.
Right.
It's not like they lose sleep at night over that. I mean, there are exceptions. There are some Indian devotees who are great preachers, who are great souls and great preachers and all that. But in general, they don't lose sleep over that. And so essentially, ISKCON reinvented itself as a Kanishta Adhikari movement. I realize you're not supposed to say these things, and no one says it. And
Why not?
Yeah, but it's just, I think it's true, and I am going to say it. ISKCON reinvented itself as a Kanishta Adhikari movement where it's the opposite of what Prabhupada taught. Rather than we preach, that's why we have temples, we preach, and just to keep the devotees, on track, we do some puja. Instead, temples basically do puja, and to pay for it, we do a little preaching. To keep the bells ringing. So, in the West, most of the temples in the West, the main activity is the temple puja, not preaching. So in all these different ways, Prabhupada's teachings have been inverted. And yet, if you do the opposite of what Prabhupada said, but you wear a dhoti or sari, then you're a real Prabhupada follower.
Mm.
That's what it's come to. I mean, there's so many superficial, hypocritical religions in the world. I don't think we're supposed to add to the number. You can preach the opposite of what Prabhupada said, and yet if you wear a dhoti, you're his real follower. It's come to that.
We had a wonderful experience recently here in Atlanta. In Decatur, they have one of the biggest book fairs in the country. 85,000 people. So this
Nice
year,
town.
Huh?
Nice town.
Oh, that we had a beautiful tent set up there, book display, and so many things. What we experienced was that people were coming over to us instead of us chasing people, take this, take that.
Oh yeah.
By the hundreds they were coming.
Book tables are great. Book tables are great.
It was fantastic. And then that Sunday after the program, at least 3 or 4 people came from that. They were so impressed with meeting devotees.
No, it's great, but the interesting question is, are they still coming?
No, there's no follow-up.
But also, you see, here's the problem. We have, like Balabhadra, a lot of devotees who are really great ambassadors for Prabhupada. The problem is, we have ambassadors but no country.
Mm-hmm.
When you're an ambassador, in other words, there is no, in the Western world, there is no Hare Krishna movement that Western people feel comfortable with. And so you can do all these outreach programs, but there's no movement for them to join. Because the movement we do have, Western people in general don't feel comfortable with. So structurally, historically, the real need today, which I keep saying, I feel sometimes it's like crying out in the wilderness. What we really need to do to get this movement back on track is there has to be a Western Hare Krishna movement. Not merely a Hare Krishna movement in the West, but a Western movement that takes full advantage of all of the options Prabhupada offered us. Prabhupada actually gave us permission. In fact, he urged us to do certain things to make the Western mission work. And those instructions from Prabhupada are never activated. They're never utilized. It's like you're in a war and you're losing the war. You've got these weapons that will win the war, but you don't get the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
You just leave them there locked up. Prabhupada gave us the weapons we need to win. We're losing now. And when I say losing, I mean what Prabhupada told me personally over and over and over again in his conversations with me. A powerful, relevant, Western Hare Krishna movement made up of Western people. Where is it? In that sense, in terms of what Prabhupada didn't get on the Jaladuta because someone told him a lot of Indians were moving to America. I gotta go chase them down. There is no Western Hare Krishna movement in this country, or practically any other Western country. I mean, there are devotees. I'm exaggerating a little bit, dramatic effect from LA, but the point is that, obviously there are good devotees, little hyperbole, right, just to spice it. I mean, obviously there are many very excellent devotees or nice programs and all that. But in terms of a Western Hare Krishna movement, go in any major city in this country, you better take your Hindi dictionary.
So do you envision it being parallel, or is it?
Yeah, okay, that's the point I wanted to make.
That's why I was trying to get to that.
Oh, sorry, Bhatta Acharya, it's my old buddy. Yes, the fact that in every major city in North America practically we have Indian temples, it's not a problem. It's actually a great asset. The fact that there are people, souls who took birth in Indian bodies, who love Krishna, who want to serve Krishna, who recognize Prabhupada, that's not a problem. That's a great thing. Further, as I learned myself in my, GBC here flailing away in ignorance, what I learned is that you can't change these temples for two reasons. One, psychological, the other, ethical. I've always got these little lists for everything, isn't it? So, the psychological reason is that in these temples, whether it's Atlanta or Chicago or Detroit or Philadelphia or Silicon Valley or Houston or Dallas or St. Louis, on and on and on and on and on, you have predominantly Indian congregations that have been there for decades. And for decades, they've been faithfully serving the temple, giving donations, their hard-earned money, bringing their families there. And so psychologically, the roots go very deep. And ethically, it would be wrong. It would be unethical, unfair to those congregations to come in and say, we want to take the temples and make them Western temples. And that's what I learned in Atlanta. It's actually unethical. They deserve the temples. They deserve the temples because they've been faithfully coming to these temples for decades and giving their hard-earned money and faithfully supporting us in so many ways. It's their temple. I mean, it's Prabhupada's temple, but it's also their temple. And so I think to try to, transform a temple, an Indian congregation, Western temple is actually unethical. It's the wrong thing to do. What we really need to do is create a Western Hare Krishna movement. Within ISKCON, God love ISKCON. Yeah, because actually, for one thing, because among all of us, there's only one person that actually has the purity and the potency to start an international society for Krishna consciousness. That's Prabhupada.
Right.
And we've seen there's all these little pathetic Prabhupada wannabes that leave and start their own little movements, and that's all they are. It's just these little wannabes. They're never the real thing. And if ISKCON has so many problems, if I started a movement, it would have 100 times more problems. I could have, like every dog has his day, I could have fun for a few years and, and fantasize and I'm a big acharya or something. But then as soon as I die, it'll just become much worse than ISKCON. Also, history teaches us that you need, as Bhaktisiddhanta said, a religious institution is a necessary evil. And I always give this example that if you look at the Catholic Church, everyone in the world knows who the Pope is. Who in the world knows who the head of the Methodist Church is? Do you know? The Lutheran Church? Episcopalian Church? Yeah, because no one's ever heard of them. And so the point is that if you're unified, it's much more powerful. There is strength in unity. And so on historical grounds and on the grounds of our loyalty to Prabhupada, there's no question of going outside of ISKCON.
Right.
But within ISKCON, there has to be a Western Hare Krishna movement. And just thinking, if we just go out in the street and jump up and down enough times, eventually they'll get it. No, just, we gotta jump just, 739,000 more times, we just jump. I'll give an example. When I went to Harvard, I discovered very soon after I went there that the Hare Krishna was a running gag in the Sanskrit and Indian Studies department at Harvard. I mean, it was just like, it was the department joke. And the reason is that the boys would come down to Harvard Square, of all places, and they'd run around in circles and jump up and down and bang on the drums, totally oblivious to where they were. Desha call of it, know where you are, know what the age is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big joke. I mean, it wasn't even malicious, it was just like, everyone was just laughing. It was just laughing. And so when I went to Harvard, I went there with, fruited shirt and pants, fruits coming out of them, and but I had my kantimala, and I went as a devotee. Everyone knew I was a devotee. I even, sometimes when class got boring, I even chant my rounds. One time, the professor said to me, "I noticed sometimes you chant, during the class." So, but everyone knew I was a devotee. I had my shikha and everything, and as it so happens, by Krishna's arrangement, I was the best student in the graduate program. And I actually got my doctorate about half the time as everybody else. So, and I was there, they knew me, and I'm a friendly guy. And so, interestingly, the same people who were laughing at the Hare Krishna movement, it was just like a big joke. After a little while, they began to ask me if I would explain to them about the Hare Krishna movement and explain to them about ISKCON. Oh, one other thing. Oh, don't film this because it's